quarterback play, yeah, I would love for you to assess how he performed down the stretch. Of course, another big performance on the scoreboard and in coming back from 15 down in the American Conference Championship game.
Yeah,
or 17 down, I think, was the 15-point win, down 17, outscoring Memphis 49-17.
Yeah, it was it was a wild game, and I was at the game. From what we were seeing, it started out pretty rough. At one point, it was 38-17 Memphis in that game. It felt like it was like the season was slipping away. Darryl Mack obviously started the whole game. Now, I remember he got that start earlier this year against ECU and looked average in terms of running the offense. He ran for a lot, but that was pretty much the bulk of it. He did not have a very good day throwing the football. Didn't have the best of days throwing the football when he came in replacement for Mackenzie Milton after Mackenzie suffered that horrifying knee injury. That, by the way, he's having another operation on here in the next day or so. We just found out, but the game plan, I mean, he had a full week to prepare for Memphis. UCF had played Memphis once before this year in the rain, won the game by 1 up in the Liberty Bowl. It was the closest call they'd had yet. And Mack was outstanding. He actually threw for almost 400 yards. It was actually more yardage in that game that he threw for than Mackenzie Milton had thrown for in any single game this season. And Milton finished sixth in the Heisman balloting. But in addition to that, the running threat that he presented, he ran for 4 touchdowns against Memphis, all in the second half. And that set a new school record, 4 rushing touchdowns by a quarterback. Dante Culpepper never did that. Milton never did that, obviously. Bortles never did that. So that was a tremendous boost to UCF, where they realized that, okay, if Mackenzie Milton's not going to be back, and, you know, at least at this point, obviously we don't know. It's very difficult to speculate, but, you know, it's one of those things that if you're a coach, you kind of have to prepare for. If he's not going to be back, we'll be okay. In fact, we'll probably be more than okay, because Mack actually specializes throwing down the field, I think, a lot better than Mackenzie. He's got a stronger arm. I'm not saying Mackenzie's arm is not as strong, but he hit for 4 passes of 44 yards or longer in the second half of that game, and or rather in the whole game. I think 3 of them were in the second half. And Josh Heupel likes the vertical passing game. That was the biggest difference in the offense in the transition from Frost to Heupel. Is Frost liked to keep things sort of closer to the line of scrimmage, work the seams a little bit more. Heupel's not afraid to get the ball down the field. And when you combine Mack's arm and his mobility with the speed UCF has on the outside, Otis Anderson out there, you got guys like Marlon Williams on the outside, Dredrick Snelson's had another good year, Gabe Davis, an enormous target downfield, 6'5" to throw to. LSU is going to be without their starting 2 corners in this game. So if you're Darryl Mack and you're Josh Heupel, you got to be salivating at the opportunity to try and attack LSU's secondary, and you can keep them off balance because, as we mentioned before, you know, Darryl, or DJ as we like to call him, is a very, very good runner of the football. So Coach O is going to have his work cut out for him, I think, in trying to plan for this UCF offense with Darryl Mack. And I think that a lot of the college football world, particularly in the Americans, is probably going to be looking at these last couple games and thinking, man, we just dealt with 3 years of Mackenzie Milton. Now we got this kid coming up behind him. I mean, they're going to have to close this thing down, because this is kind of getting out of hand with the guys that UCF has at their disposal. So it should be a very, very interesting New Year's Day to see what UCF has in store on offense.
So, Jeff, I like where you're taking this, because there are air raid offenses out there right now, and have been in the past, where they, number one, either had a quarterback who was not a statue, but he was not a threat to run and really burn the defense, because he typically took a 3-step drop and got it out to the wideouts. And there's a lot of slip screens, a lot of bubble screens, and a lot of quick passing.
Mhm.
So it's the element that Central Florida has is being able to threaten the defense. Number one, stretch the field with a quarterback that can throw it deep. Number two, he can take off and run. He's a running threat. Number three, he only threw 27 passes against Memphis. This is not you've got a reputation nationally as, oh, they spread the field, they throw the ball all over the place. No, this team, unlike a traditional Texas Tech, Washington State, for as much success as they've had with Mike Leach, they can't run the ball. This team can run the ball 350 yards against Memphis.
Yeah, and they've been running the ball all season, too. They're one of the top 10 teams in the country in rushing. I don't know how this has slipped the narrative, is that UCF has not made their hay. All the points that they've scored, top 10 in the country in scoring, you'd think that they do that by throwing the ball all over the place. They run the football. In fact, prior to the Memphis game, if I'm not mistaken, they were the top-ranked rushing team in all of FBS that did not run the triple option. You think about Army, Navy, those kinds of teams, you know what they're going to get. But they run for 350 yards and they pass for 0 or maybe 20. UCF is doing it through the air and on the ground. I think that's the thing that for me is really encouraging to see, and I think for everybody else has to be a little bit scary, because they figured out the secret sauce. They figured out college football in the 21st century from an offensive point of view. So if I don't know, and a couple of teams have tried, different things in terms of how to try and attack UCF. Do you play press coverage with a two deep shell? Do you try and bring the ends a little bit more? Do you try and keep the ends at home? It's very difficult to say at this point, because, and this is where we see like the evolution of offense in college football, is that we've seen this, and Scott Frost kind of did this a little bit, and Heupel kind of approaches it from a slightly different angle, but we've seen the fusion of the sort of option offenses, which guys like Frost played in back in the 90s, with that air raid downfield attack scheme where you're attacking the seams constantly. You're running a bunch of crossing routes. You're running, let's just call them what they are, pick plays. And you're trying to get guys, and you're trying to get your athletes wide open in space. And Heupel runs that where he spreads his skill guys across the entire 53 1/3 yards of the field. So what you have is this kind of mad scientist combined offense that takes the sort of the option principles with that air raid, and then predicated on the idea of, we want to isolate one defender on one of our best players and make it so that no matter what decision that defender makes, he's wrong. And when you do that and you work in tempo, as Heupel has, I have to go back and do a study on it, but I think the overwhelming percentage of snaps that UCF has run this year have come before the play clock hit 30. That can really exhaust a defense. And we've seen a couple teams where there's been a little bit of controversy here and there about, are some teams possibly embellishing injuries, shall we say, on the field in order to try and stop UCF. There were a couple of instances where, some folks had some isolated videos, like I think in the game in Pittsburgh in particular, where there was one player who was standing around, looked like he was just fine. He looks over to the sideline, and then all of a sudden, he looked like he got his knee kind of gave out from underneath him or something, but to try and slow down UCF when they were on a drive. So
there must have been a hole in the field or something.
I know. I wasn't sure. I thought that maybe UCF may have planted a trap door or something, but we're seeing these defensive tactics try and catch up with the offense, but the fact is they just haven't been able to. And if you're UCF, if that's what teams are resorting to in order to try and slow your offense down, I think you actually have to be encouraged by that.